Hi, welcome back. It's Marjorie from the Red Resistance Podcast. We are here to talk about episode 7, Shattered. And it really does feel like everybody in this episode shattered, and all of their broken pieces have fallen into place to bring us into the end of the series very nicely. But before we get into this episode, let's talk about this title a little bit. There are 2 quotes from the Handmaid's Tale book that reference Shattered. One of them is when she's getting summoned to Fred's office for the first time, and she's trying to figure out the implications of what that means. And she says, "You can wet the rim of a glass and run your finger around the rim and it'll make a sound. That's what I feel like, the sound of glass. I feel like the word shatter." And it's coming at a time in the book when her world is really crashing down around her, exactly like this episode. That was the first quote that jumped out to me, is that word shatter. I really love the way that Margaret Atwood used that in the book. But I think there's actually another quote in the book that applies even better. She's talking about the shatterproof glass, and she says, "I know why there is no glass in front of the watercolor picture of blue irises, and why the window opens only partly, and why the glass in it is shatterproof. It isn't running away they're afraid of. We wouldn't get far. It's those other escapes, the ones you can open in yourself, given a cutting edge." And I think that's really what we're leading up to, is seeing these shattered people and all these broken pieces fall, and the ways in which they're going to pick up the pieces and give themselves a cutting edge. And in the quote, she's obviously talking about suicide and that being the only escape from Gilead. So to see, after 6 seasons of this show, everybody coming together to find their own way of escaping the torment of Gilead, because June was able to escape, and she still wasn't able to rid herself or free herself or flee. She's still being dragged back into this fight, as we've seen through the season. And to bring it back to the Handmaid's Tale series, those 2 quotes definitely bring up the image of glass and broken glass, and that's like one of my favorite song choices in the show in season 2. Annie Lennox is Walking on Broken Glass when Larry is driving Emily to flee the country, and he's blasting that in the car, and it's so jarring. That song brings me so much joy every time I listen to it now, because I think of that episode. But that's kind of very fitting in what's happening here. At that time, Emily's entire world was crashing down on her, but it was right before she was about to get out. And here we're seeing everyone's worlds are crashing down around them. And through the episode, we see this plan formulate. And I'm just hoping that this will be some kind of rainbow at the end of a storm, the same way that it was for Emily, where she was shattered and then was able to find a cutting edge and escape Gilead in her own way. So I'm hoping that by the end of this series, we will have some kind of conclusion like that for these people. But of course, it's going to look different because, A, we know the end game. We know that the show is going to go on to a sequel. So the happy ending of everyone kind of getting exactly what they want. June wants Hannah. She's not going to get her. So I'm curious to see how this is all going to be pulled together, but we're starting to see every single person be brought into the mix, with the exception of Nick. And this is a heavy Nick episode, but only through June's eyes. Like, this is a lot of June introspection of her relationship with Nick over the course of these 6 seasons that we've seen. So we pick up right where we left off with the last episode of June and Nick in the closet, and she is shattered from this revelation that Nick just gave up Mayday's plan. And in the last episode, I had said that he threw her under the bus. That's not what I meant. Some people had pointed out in the comments that it wasn't really June that he threw under the bus. It was Mayday's plan. And it's entirely fair to say that Mayday's plan didn't seem great to begin with, and he could be protecting everybody except for the Jezebels by confessing to Wharton in the way that he did. And obviously he didn't know. He's going to tell June later, like, he didn't expect for Wharton to shut it down in the way that he did. And you could definitely argue that Nick was actually acting in June's best interest by preserving her life and allowing her to survive, and not continuing this plan that's going to hurt him because it's going to make him look terrible with this New Bethlehem trade route security that he's all in charge of. It's going to be that they infiltrate. He's already in trouble with Wharton for going to Jezebels. Like, he had to confess something. And I think for Nick, he thought this was the only way to keep June safe and himself safe. And that's what he's most concerned about. The issue is that June is realizing for the first time that fundamentally they are on opposing sides. And this is the first time that it's come to actual opposing issue between the two of them. She's never had a reason to not trust Nick. Moira's going to say it later in this episode, but she's also never trusted Nick with information specifically for Mayday that wasn't just to keep her safe. Like, Nick has always acted to keep June safe. He has not always acted to take Gilead down. That's been really clear from the beginning, this ambiguity of Nick's character, both in the books and in the series. And in the book, that's the whole thing with Nick, is June trying to figure out, is he good or is he bad? Is he trustworthy or is he not? And in this episode, June is realizing that there are times when Nick is not going to be trustworthy. And what does that mean for their relationship moving forward? And one other thing that I wanted to bring up, just because it was a really great point and I hadn't even connected the dots there. In the comments, Nora pointed out that June was ready to throw Mayday's entire plan out the window to get Janine out, which was entirely self-serving of her and her personal connection with Janine. She was ready to jeopardize all of the Jezebel's safety and the Mayday plan just for her friend. So for Nick to do the same thing and keep himself safe and survive in Gilead by stopping this plan that's already going to be detrimental to both him and potentially June, he's doing the same thing. Him and June have done the same thing. The issue is that June is always working to take Gilead down. Like, that's her motive. If she can't get Hannah out, she's going to get other kids out. If she has an opportunity to go back in and get Janine, she's going back in to get Janine. But at the end of the day, June's stakes and her morals and her goals are all aligned to take down Gilead, and her and Nick are not aligned here. Despite their love, despite their connection, despite their relationship, they're working against each other in ways that they haven't had to really contend with yet or to face. And here they are in the closet, and June has to face Nick for the first time. And the first shot is really, really cool. So when we ended last episode, the last shot is of June, and you can barely see Nick. It's so dark, and all the light is just washing over June, and it kind of looks like she's alone, like she's realizing for the first time that her and Nick are not entirely on the same page here. So as they start out this episode, they pick up right where they left off, and June and Nick are still in the closet, but the first shot is of the light coming through the slats in the door and dividing them right down the middle. So you see June and Nick on opposing sides of this line of light drawn through the middle of this closet. And June is facing for the first time that they are going to be on opposing sides moving forward. And they have been. And it just hasn't been an issue in this way. Nick has always been able to not only operate for his own safety, but also to maneuver and rise up within this Gilead hierarchy of men, from guardians to commanders. And he's aligned himself with this marriage that's politically motivated, it seems like, because he's got a lot of protection in Wharton. And so much so that he was willing to betray June for the first time in order to stay in Wharton's good graces, because he's that powerful and he can either take Nick down or he can help him. And so for Nick's own survival, he has to be aligned with Wharton. And this is the first time in June and Nick's relationship that his alignment and survival and protections within Gilead for himself have directly opposed what June needs from him. And that's kind of the crux of their issue moving forward, is that they're always going to be on opposing sides. We know that Nick loves June and that he would do anything for her, but ultimately his loyalties lie with Gilead. He's resigned himself to the fact that he's going to stay in Gilead and Gilead is going to prosper, and he's aligned himself to do well within that system. The only time he's ever veered from that course is to keep June safe. And in the shot, it's like she can see him for the first time clearly as she's looking at him. He isn't shrouded in the ambiguity that he's been shrouded in through this series, and that has allowed for their relationship to flourish and that love to grow, because she's never been able to pinpoint good or bad. He's just another person within the constructs of this regime that has to survive, and they've been brought together, and here we are. He let his emotional guard down and fell in love with somebody within a system that is structured to punish anything like that. And I think you can see in the last episode how much she really misjudged how trustworthy Nick would be given his precarious situation as a commander. Obviously, she's not privy to all of the ways in which he's walking a really tight line right now with Wharton, and she doesn't realize that she has kind of pushed him off the edge to begin with. He wouldn't have been at Jezebels getting the letters if it wasn't for June, and he wouldn't have had to kill the Guardians and already been under Wharton's suspicions. And this is just the first time, like Nick's going to say it to her later, this is the first time that she has to face the position that he's always been in. She's realizing that he's always had one foot on Gilead's side. And she wasn't really willing to acknowledge that in the full scope of what that meant. So again, when I say that June is seeing Nick for the first time clearly, it's not that Nick has changed or that his actions are not understandable or that they're not predictable given everything we've seen about Nick. It's just that for the first time, June is realizing just how precarious and fragile their situation is, given the fact that they're on opposing sides. And that's why I love the shot so much, because it just makes it very clear that they are divided. So this scene is intermingled with shots of June and Nick in the closet and what happened at Jezebels when Wharton shut it down. You get one quick shot of Jezebels and you hear the girls laughing in the background. Then it cuts back to Nick in the closet. And as these shots are being intermingled of Jezebels and knowing what's about to happen at Jezebels and the fact that he already knows and he's sitting in this closet, all of this information laid out for June in a way that he would not have presented it to her. And now he's sitting in this closet with no ability to explain himself, only to watch her hear this information. And you can really just see the weight of him having to play both sides for so long with Gilead and June. And now because of everything that June's doing with Mayday, his actions to protect June because of her actions to get this Mayday plan off the ground, there are more unintended consequences and more bodies on the fire. And this is what Nick wanted to avoid. This is Nick's horror, is watching all of these people die unnecessarily. June's horror is watching all these women have to live in this place. He sees Mayday as fighting a losing battle, and June sees it as no other choice. So after the quick shot of Nick and watching him kind of shatter in his own way, there's a shot of Janine getting ready at Jezebels. And she's doing her makeup, and she's looking at that picture on the mirror. And there is a little bit of a bittersweetness because she knows this rescue is coming and she knows that that means she has to leave her child. But she doesn't have very long to even think about it before those guardians bust in. Then it cuts back to June and Nick, and she is staring him down in this closet at this point, and he can't make eye contact with her. He looks down at the ground and he's just like shaking his head like an Etch-a-Sketch. And then you hear the baby start to cry, and at this point it's signaling that Serena's finally going to be able to get an opportunity to take Wharton out, and Nick's time to explain himself to June is coming very shortly. And as excruciating as this silence in this closet is, getting out of this closet and him having to answer for everything that she just heard is probably more excruciating. Then we cut back to the terror at Jezebels, and they're moving all the women into the showers. And the efficiency of this slaughter is so chilling to me. Like, they had to orchestrate and plan out how this was going to be done, and there had to have been this conversation of where's the cleanest way to kill all these women in this bloody mess. Put them in the showers. The imagery in this scene haunts me every time I watch it. And she instantly puts her hands up, and she's really trying to put herself between the guardians and the women. And she says to him, "You don't have to do this." And it's entirely futile. Like, there's nothing that she's going to say at this point that's going to change his mind. But the fact that Janine is still stepping up and trying to do something in the face of futility is really heartbreaking, because I thought this was going to be one of her last moments. For her trying to stand up for her girls in this hopeless situation, this is what she went back for, was to protect these women. And even in her last breaths, this is what she's trying to do. But she is spared from instant death, although we find out later she's not really spared from much. Janine is barely pulled away from the group before the guardians just unload their weapons on them. And in just one moment, all of these women's lives are snuffed out. Oh, and I had so many dark thoughts about those that didn't die instantly and what that's like. And then I didn't want to think about it any further. But that's another reason why the Testaments has really ruined me in such a well done way. It's such a well written way, I guess. There's just so much imagery from that book and so much horror that I go back to. And the firing squad situation with the aunts and Lydia is one of those that I don't think I'll ever be able to erase from my mind. But this is a good reminder that I can't not talk about the Testaments when we watch the show. It really left such an imprint in my mind of the horrors of firing squads, and the scene was definitely up to par with that. So the final scene, Janine is dragged away and she is shattered too. The horror that she just had to witness is going to stay with her forever. And I don't know how many more times this girl could be shattered. So we cut back to the closet, and Serena and Wharton go for a walk. And this time, the way that the shot is lit, June is completely in the dark and the light is washed on Nick. She's still in the dark about what we just witnessed at Jezebels. And Nick knows that they're about to get out of this closet, and he's going to have to explain to her face to face everything that he was trying to hide from in Paris. Then we get one final shot of piles of faceless, bloodied limbs. And it's a good reminder that all of this was enacted by those letters, and they were just trying to get their story out. And these were women with stories and lives, and they've been reduced to a pile of limbs, their blood pooling down the drain. They've always been expendable and disposable to Gilead, and this is as evident as it could ever be. And so I think at the end of the day, like, despite everything we know about Nick and everything that June knows about Nick and everything she feels about Nick, she can't look away from the fact that his loyalties are gonna lie with a regime that does things like this. Then we go back to the closet with June and Nick, and there's a really interesting imagery, and I doubt that this is intentional, but my mind did go right to another June and Nick scene from season 3. When he goes to her at the Lawrences and tells her that he is getting deployed to Chicago, and he's essentially saying goodbye to her. This could be the last time they see each other. He's going to the front lines of the war, and it's unclear if he's even going to come back. And she basically tells him, like, well, if you can't help me get Hannah out, you're gonna get killed and you're gonna be useless. Bye. He leaves the room, but he doesn't leave the house. He stands outside the door and he leans his head back on the wall or the door frame, and he waits for her. And she does very shortly after come up, and they have the goodbye that he was actually looking for. This imagery is kind of exactly opposite, which is interesting. It's like at that point she could still see, in season 3, she could still see past what he had become in order to survive. Like, she knew that he had been thrust into the situation and he had to survive just as much as she did, and he didn't have control and autonomy over his life and his situations any more than she did as a driver and a handmaid. And now he's climbed this ladder and kind of been thrust up this ladder by Fred in order to, like, get him out of the way and send him off to war. And so here he is getting sent off to war. And June can see past the commander uniform and anything that entails, and the fact that he's fighting for Gilead, because she still sees it as him trying to survive, and she's still able to go towards him despite everything that she knows about him at that point. Then here in the closet, it's the opposite. It's like she has seen him so clearly now, and seen so clearly that they are working against each other. She has to look away from him, so she moves and puts her forehead against the door. And it's just very opposite imagery. I'm sure it wasn't intentional or thought of at all in this episode, but it did make me think of it. It's kind of the halfway point of the series and the halfway point of June and Nick's relationship, essentially, and everything we've seen in these 6 seasons. And so at that point, for her to be still going towards him, still knowing that he's a commander in Gilead, and accepting that he's going to have to make decisions. I mean, he eventually bombs her, which inadvertently causes her to get out. So I do think that this might shatter her in a way in which will repair and they will come back stronger. I don't think this is the end of Nick and June. I just think this is a big hurdle in which they both have to contend with some things personally. But this time in this closet, June is shattered. But I think from this point on, I don't know if June's going to be able to have any kind of relationship with Nick moving forward if he doesn't kind of explicitly start acting against Gilead. It's one thing to survive. Like, I think in this situation, he had to do what he had to do. But you see other people like Serena and Lawrence in this episode doing more to take down Gilead than Nick, who's just trying to survive within its constructs. And I don't think that's going to be enough for June moving forward. Like, he's going to have to be morally opposed to Gilead, not just morally opposed to June being in Gilead. So they get their opportunity to get out of the closet, and June won't even look at him. And Nick leads with the only silver lining that he has, which is that your friend was taken, but I'll find out where. And he doesn't even say at this point that they're all dead. But I guess he's implying it because she does basically figure it out from there. But this isn't enough of a consolation for June. She was going to get Janine out. She was going to get these women out. She was going to kill commanders. Now, even if they're not dead, just the fact that Jezebels is no longer a viable option as a way to get back at Gilead and to hurt Gilead and to get a win for Mayday. We're going to see in the next scene, she's going to have to go back and explain this to Luke and everyone else at Mayday, that the one person she said she had on her side to protect her and help her was the person who ruined their entire plan. Which isn't to say that it was not a terrible plan that wasn't going to work to begin with. It doesn't matter. June was already on board with this plan, and this hope dangled of getting Janine out. And now, the fact that Janine's alive isn't going to be good enough if she's still in Gilead. And I'm surprised that Nick didn't see that, but I don't think he had much else to say at this point. And I think it's interesting that he says your friend instead of Janine. When you think that Nick doesn't see Janine as a person, just as an extension to June. The only reason he's concerned about her and the only reason he's bringing her up and the only reason he noticed her is because eye patch, and also because of her connection to June. He knows it's June's friend and therefore he cares about her. But he doesn't care about all these other women because they don't have a connection to June. It's a little concerning that Nick doesn't have the ability to see how bad Gilead is for anyone else unless it's June explaining to him how bad it is. In the show where names are so important, the fact that he doesn't use Janine's name, he's gonna do it later. He's gonna say your husband and your friend when he's talking about Moira. And so it's like just a very interesting tell on Nick's part of how he places the hierarchy of importance in saving people, and it's really related to how closely June cares about them. So as she comes out and she can't look at him, he's trying to explain to her how Wharton had wanted the whole place gone and that he didn't tell him that the girls had anything to do with it. And she infers from that the girls are dead, and she turns to face him. And when she faces him and asks him if they're dead, he can't look at her anymore. And he looks down at the ground. He says, I didn't think he would do it. And she tells him to take her back. And it's like they're a piece of glass shattering apart. But I do think that this is going to open a cutting edge for them. I don't think this is the end. I know this is not the end of June and Nick. I just think that this is a very important point that June has to face. Like, she just hasn't faced the fact that Nick has been working for and playing for and operating under Gilead the entire time that she's known him. Just because he's been survival for her doesn't mean that he's acting in any grand scheme to help anyone else in Gilead survive. And I think that this will be a turning point for Nick. I think he's going to realize that he has to make some kind of move in order to be with June. Like, if that's his biggest motivation, then he's going to have to take Gilead down or attempt to take Gilead down. But he can't just live happily ever after with Rose and this baby and be a commander in Gilead and hope to have any kind of relationship with June moving forward while he operates and lives and essentially, by putting that uniform on, condones the atrocities that happen around him every day. And he's always going to have a target on his back in Gilead, especially as a commander rising up in the ranks, towing the line and following orders and doing as you're told and not questioning. And I think Nick is starting to question. He's done what he's needed to survive, but also to thrive within Gilead. And I think at this point he's going to have to make a choice and take some action to prove to June where his conscience lies. So in the next scene, he's driving her back to Mayday, and she's sitting in the back seat. Probably tactically, I think that might be where she should be sitting. Although, I don't know, she seems kind of visible still in the back seat. I'm wondering if that was just a choice for her to just sit back there so she didn't have to sit next to him. But I do really like that we're seeing once again him driving. I mean, this is the start of their relationship. Was Nick always driving her around, often to places that he didn't want to drive her to, and then expressing regret and saying that he wished he could have just driven away with her at that point. There are several times where he's had her in a car and he's had to deliver her to something very negative and then said to her later that he wished things were different. And I kind of think that's what that Paris Hail Mary attempt was at the end of the last episode, was him finally doubling down on the wish that he's always had to run away with her. And it's in his grasp now. Like, I don't know how true it is when he says that he's got the paperwork and he can get them to Paris. But I think that for all the times he wished he had, this was his maybe last opportunity to get to run away with her. And obviously that didn't work out. And obviously it wasn't going to work out. June wasn't going to leave everything behind and just run away to Paris. But now he's carting her back to Mayday, and she won't even speak to him. Car is silent. And she starts to get out before he even stops the car. They must be relatively close. So she gets out and she starts to walk because she doesn't want to be seen getting dropped off by the enemy. And she's going to have to go explain herself and explain why this plan went wrong to all of these people. So I can understand her not wanting to have Nick pull into the driveway. And she's still grappling with the fact that she really trusted that Nick's loyalties to her were going to be stronger than they were to Gilead. But in the end, he had to survive, and her plan was going to get him killed. So when she gets out, he says to her, "You never cared what I did unless it helped you," which is true. Then he follows it up with, "I killed those two guardians to protect you, to protect your friend and your husband." And again, he's framing everything that he's doing for June. And at this point, he needs to be framing what he's doing for Mayday. Because working for Gilead and helping Gilead while simultaneously trying to protect June isn't going to be enough for her. Especially since protecting her is keeping her out of a fight that she can't stay out of. And I think at the end of the day, their love for each other isn't the issue in this situation. She needs to see from him that he wants Gilead to suffer and hurt and to be brought down. And instead she's seeing resignation in him. So they start to have a back and forth about how he had to kill those guardians, and one of them was only 19 and they were just doing their job. And I think that's how Nick sees everything that he's doing in Gilead, not as he's working for or helping Gilead, he's just doing his job. And he was that 19-year-old at one point who was brought in and told, this is what you need to do in order to survive. This is what you need to do in order to move up in this world. Just follow these orders and everything's going to be fine. So he just had to kill this kid who was essentially no different than Nick was at 19. And the issue is that Nick still sees himself as that 19-year-old kid who's been put in a position that he just needs to survive in. And June sees the power that he has and the ability in which he has to take down this regime is too strong for him to sit behind. I just need to survive. She wanted Serena to wear the dress and pull the strings, but Nick is in a way stronger position to be able to wear the suit and pull the strings, just given the fact that he's a man and a commander in this world, and the fact, and an eye, that he has so much autonomy and so much ability to affect change. So the fact that the only time he does is to protect June is the issue. It's just not going to be enough for her anymore. And she says to him, you gave up those women to save yourself. And he says, we all want to save ourselves. We're fucking human. That's what we do. But not June. Like, he got really mad at June when she wouldn't save herself. When she came back to Gilead, when he tried to get her out, she wasn't going to leave without Hannah. And he was really upset with her. He said, you're going to die here. Is that what you want? And I think he just couldn't understand why she wouldn't want to save herself in that situation. And it's just not a line of logic that you can use with June. She's just willing to sacrifice herself for the cause, and Nick's not willing to do that. And that's an imbalance in the relationship that they can't get past at this point. Not only is it an imbalance in the relationship, it puts them directly at odds within their relationship and within the ways in which they need to move forward. And like, we've talked a lot about whether or not June over the course of the series has acted in selfish ways. But every time that we've debated that, it's always been, at least what she's been doing is trying to hurt Gilead and take down Gilead. She might be doing it in a selfish way to save somebody or to enact her own specific plan. And, you know, like she was like disrupting the Martha's plan, and there's debate on whether or not on the grand scheme of things she was hurting the Mayday operation. But every time the actions that we're debating about are always either to escape, help somebody else escape, or to disrupt in some way Gilead's motives. She just wants to burn things down. She's accepted she can't get Hannah out, but she's also accepted that she can't find peace anywhere other than fighting against Gilead. And how do you stay in a relationship with somebody who's working their way up the hierarchy of commanders with no intention of trying to take Gilead down? If nothing else, only because he doesn't see a way out. And I get that Nick is stuck in between a rock and a hard place because the Swiss weren't willing to work with him. They found him untrustworthy. So at that point, he really did have to resign to operating within Gilead until Tawalo came around and offered him a chance to be a double agent with Mayday. But he was still pretty resistant, I guess probably just because of the risk it was going to put him in. I think Nick has always been a little risk adverse, more so than June. And that's probably because of the experiences they've had under Gilead. He's had a much more protected Gilead experience. He wasn't hunted down while he was trying to escape. He was a soldier in the crusade. I just don't know if June at this point is going to be able to look past the fact that Nick can live amongst the atrocities of Gilead and understand fully what they are and not try harder to bring it down. There's always going to be this fundamental difference between them of June has been shattered by Gilead long ago and has been searching for a cutting edge ever since. And Nick can live, survive, and thrive amongst the atrocities of Gilead without it shattering him. The only time it shattered him is now when he's torn between his loyalties of Gilead and his loyalties with June. And that's what Gilead has always tried to stop is that emotional connection. But because this one time Nick forged an emotional connection, it's the one time he's been able to veer away from Gilead and their rules. Otherwise, he's been able to operate under it because he's been told that's what you have to do. And he hasn't questioned it. We just haven't seen Nick question it. We've seen him circumvent it with the power that he's attained over time. We haven't even seen him really react to the atrocities of Gilead. He kind of just sits there placidly. He does have that ambiguity about him. He's not for it. He's not jumping up and down. He's not a Lydia or a Serena. And he's not even a Larry as far as like a mastermind of it. He was just a soldier in the crusade. And then he was a driver who was an eye, who's a commander. Like, he's just come up within the system and never had to be really for or against it. He lost any choices once he became a driver. He could have not joined the crusade prior to Gilead taking over, but where would that have left him now? Probably dead. I think at the end of the day, it's the fact that Nick can resign himself to his fate in Gilead, and June can't resign herself to her freedom in Alaska. And when June looks at him and says, "You're just like them," all I could think of was the conversation she has in the study with Fred. He's telling her that better doesn't mean better for everyone. I just feel like this is kind of Nick's version of better doesn't mean better for everyone. And I think she can see that parallel between Fred and Nick of Gilead is better for him and he's surviving. And there's resignation there where June wants to see rebellion. And then Nick says to her, "And you love me, so what does that make you?" Like, wrong line, Nick. You can see the realization of Holly being right washing over her. Then June walks away and she leaves Nick shattered. He was just trying to survive, and now he's lost the one thing that he was living for. And now that Gilead has left him shattered, he's going to have to find his own cutting edge of escape. It's not going to be enough to help June survive if he's also helping Gilead survive. And then we cut to Lydia at Jezebels, and she is surveying the aftermath of the Jezebels massacre. She finds Charlotte's picture and she's hugging it, and you can see that she's shattered by the way in which she couldn't protect Janine. And now she's looking at this picture, and the last thing that Janine accused her of was her stealing this baby. She did. Now Janine has been stolen from her. Losing Janine would shatter Lydia. She really needs to find her own cutting edge of escape as she puts the pieces back together from this shattering. I mean, at this point, Lydia has seen atrocity after atrocity and lie after lie about what she thought she believed in Gilead and what Gilead actually is. So it's only a couple episodes left before Lydia has some kind of changing of course. And I guess I just think that's why it's so interesting in this episode to be comparing all these other Gilead operatives to Nick, because we're seeing so many people acknowledging the ways in which Gilead does things entirely wrong and putting forth some effort to change course. And we just haven't seen that from Nick yet. The only time he's putting any effort forth, it's to protect or save June. But I'm really curious to see what Lydia is going to do with this information. We find out by the end of the episode that Janine's not actually dead, but we also find out at the end of the episode that June is going to be in-house, and I am just dying for there to be a reunion of these two people. I'm hoping that by the time she catches up with June, she will have opened her eyes to rebellion a little bit more, and maybe June will be able to push her over the edge in a way in which June has always been able to kind of coax Lydia in the right direction. So then we cut back to June, and she's walking back to Mayday without Nick, and this is the most intense walk of shame. When she arrives in the lobby, Luke comes over to greet her, and he asks her if she's okay, and he goes in for a hug, and at first she can't even hug him back. I think she feels so tainted with her relationship with Nick. And that's interesting because she never felt tainted in the past coming back. She's always been able to kind of hold space for both of these relationships and walk this line with these two men without having too many reservations, at least since she's been back in Canada with Luke. But it's like now that this relationship has come in between her relationship with Luke in such a messy and opposing sides way that I think she feels really icky and dirty and like she can't hug Luke back while she's coming off of the shattering revelation for herself. And this is also the first time that Luke has been so explicit in how June's relationship with Nick is affecting him and has affected him since he's come back. Like, they just haven't had this conversation. I'm glad they get the opportunity to, even if it took the events unfolding the way it did for this conversation to happen. Like, Luke and June need to have the conversations that they've had through this episode. And I'm hoping that in the next 3 episodes, is it 3? How many? Yeah, 3 more episodes, that we're going to see a conversation with June and Nick, and they will have their resolution. And I have my hopes for what those 2 resolutions are, and I don't think those are that likely, although I can make a case for why they're valid. So June has to tell Luke that Nick is the one who gave up their operation. And she says, I thought I could trust him. And he laughs at her. He says he's a commander in Gilead. He doesn't give a shit about the resistance. He doesn't want us to win. The only thing he ever cared about was you. And because of that, you're gonna run around like he's some hero, like he's some fucking savior that you've been pining for ever since you got back. You think I don't see that? And that needed to be said. That must have been simmering in his mind for very long, especially all the time he was sitting in prison, and it just needed to come out. She says, I don't know what to do. And he says, don't be in love with a fucking Nazi. And he walks away, leaving June chattering even more. Because in this time that we've seen her back in Canada, and in this time that Luke is referencing, like, we've seen her pining for Nick and jumping at the chance to go see him. We've seen their reunions. It's wrought with emotion. And we know their relationship, but we haven't seen Luke and June have this conversation. We haven't seen her acknowledge Luke in her relationship with Nick since getting back. She has when she was in Gilead. When she first found out that Luke was alive, when she kept going back to Nick afterwards, when she sent Luke the tapes, like, she was reconciling the fact that she was in love with 2 men at the same time. Like, she acknowledged that she had these feelings for these 2 men, and given the circumstances, she had to make the choices she had to make. And since coming back to Canada, we haven't seen her have this conversation with Luke. And we've seen Luke say to her in the past that he would love the person that she became. I think it was in leading up to their wedding, and Moira was giving her a little bit of pushback about marrying him, given how he was married when they started their relationship. She's asking him about the vows in his first wedding, and I think it's in that scene where he asks her, like, what's this about? And she's like alluding to the fact that they're getting married, and what if she changes? Will he still love her if she changes? And he says, if you change, I'll love the person you become. And that is something we've seen entirely true for Luke from the moment that he's been in a relationship with June. Everything we've seen is that he's going to love the person she'll become. And he has, even when that person she became was someone who was in love with somebody else. And this is the first time that we see Luke ask her to not love Nick, to make a choice, to pick a side. And that's essentially what she wants Nick to do. Pick a side. Choose who you're fighting for. She's going to have to decide ultimately where her loyalty lies, the same way that Nick is going to have to decide where his is. So in the next scene, Rita goes to visit Nick. She at least introduces the reason for her trip as making sure that June got out okay. But I think she wanted to check her alliance with Nick and make sure that he was going to still be able to hold up his end of the deal with her and reuniting her family and getting them out, which he said was going to take a couple years. And he is backtracking on this conversation. But she asked if June got out okay, and he says that she did. And she tells him that you're going to be able to see her again, and he doesn't think that that's going to happen, which is the first red flag with this whole New Bethlehem situation and her being able to get out with her family. If he doesn't even think he's going to be able to see June again, something is wrong, something's amiss. And he tells Rita that June thinks he's a monster. And she tells him that you're a good man, and he says not without her. And that's a little bothersome to me, that Nick can only see himself as a good person when June is around. It kind of doubles down on him being resigned to his fate and his past choices. And she tries to tell him that they were friends, and he really pushes back on that. And he says, we were never friends. I would have crossed you and you would have crossed me if it meant our own survival. And she says, don't you want to be a man who does the right thing? And he says, I don't get what I want. Again, resigned to this life that he has chosen at 19 years old, or whatever young age he was when he got sucked into Sons of Jacob with Price and all that. And Rita can tell where this conversation is going, and she can feel Nick pulling away and kind of putting up this emotional wall of any connection that the two of them have. And she says, I was counting on you. And that's when he has that line from the trailer of, this is Gilead, the only person you can count on is yourself. And that is where Nick's head is at right now. And that leaves Rita shattered. Because if he can only count on himself, and he only thinks he's capable of being a good man if June is around, and June is not around, then he's resigning himself to his own survival, and he's putting up that emotional wall of, I don't know you, nor do I owe you anything, Rita. Don't count on me because this is Gilead and you can't count on me. Somebody was asking in the comments about why June didn't tell Rita about what was going on with Mayday. and warn her about this New Bethlehem situation. But at that point, June didn't know that this plan wasn't going to work. She thought that they were going to be able to kill all these commanders, and then Larry would be able to rise even higher in the power structure and be the most powerful commander in Boston. So there's no reason to inform Rita of this Mayday plan or to disrupt her peace. Like, that was the thing that June said in that scene, is something about like, I'm glad you found peace, or I want you to have peace. This is June finally backing off. She's kind of pushed Rita and pushed Rita and pushed Rita. And we've debated on this podcast in the past of whether or not she's been too forceful in pushing Rita to acknowledge all the traumas of the past when she's trying to step away from it and find some peace. And I just feel like this was June acknowledging that she just got reunited with her sister. Like, let her have this, because June and Mayday are working behind the scenes to ensure that she keeps this. So it wasn't like June knew that she was going into this dangerous situation, because as far as June was concerned, they were going to make this a much better situation for New Bethlehem and for Rita and her sister. Then we jump over to the bridal shower at, I'm guessing, Naomi's house. I didn't actually pay attention to what that room was, but it was probably Naomi's house. I'm guessing Naomi was hosting this event. Serena's in the room with Naomi, and so Serena's got this bridal shower with Naomi, and she wasn't expecting it, and Naomi is awful in this scene, like extra awful. I'm like, what the fuck is her problem? And I'm guessing that this is just Naomi being in her most comfortable and the highest she's gonna ever rise in her own little wife hierarchy, and she's just gonna lean into that like mean girl bullshit. It's kind of the wife version of better doesn't mean better for everyone, and their conversation is so gross. First, they're like shitting on New Bethlehem, and she asks her if she's gonna get the dress at Marigold's, and these wives make it clear that they don't trust New Bethlehem. They think it's like the riffraff. This is the ungodly people, these refugees, these dangerous, unsupervised refugees in this dangerous land. We get a cameo from Caroline. We've been seeing her for a lot of seasons, so I was kind of happy to see her, although she sucks. She always sucks. And I love how she says, all those refugees, do they follow God's word? As if these women are the most pious women of all of Gilead. We heard Naomi try to say a prayer. These are just women who were conveniently married to sons of Jacob when they took over. This is the wives' version of better doesn't mean better for everyone. As long as they're comfortable and they're benefiting from the system. Like, Naomi says it later when Serena brings up the handmaids, and she's like, our present system works. It's like, for who, Naomi? You. It works for the wives. It works for the wives that get the children without the labor and don't have to worry about what happens to these handmaids after. That can be the commander's problems. Like, ugh. And Serena's the one that shifts the conversation, and she tries to get Naomi to remember that she's supposed to be supporting her husband's plan, and Naomi could care less about her husband's plan even within the setting. Naomi's only interested in remaining at the top of the wives' pecking order. So once Serena brings the husbands up, all of the wives start popping off about what their husbands say, and they're all shitting on New Bethlehem and all the reasons why it's so progressive and it's so modern and it's dangerous, and they're just regurgitating things that their husbands have said. But Serena steps in there and she says, what do you say? What are your hopes and dreams for Gilead's future? And they all just stare silently at her. And all I could think of was that scene with the Mexican consulate when she calls the wives' corner the silent half of the room. And this is absolutely the silent half of the room. So Serena tries to sell her fertility center, and she's like, well, these are my hopes and dreams. That's when Naomi jumps in and she says, the present system worked. And it's a real clear reminder that these wives do not give a fuck about these handmaids. She says, give me my child, God bless, and move on. Oh my God, that line really, really irks me. Like, obviously we've seen so many horrible things, and like, we just came off of these women getting slaughtered in a shower, but the fact that that sentiment can come out of her mouth just makes my teeth itch, as Scarlett would say. And Serena asks, where would you suggest they spend their retirement? And Naomi says, well, that's for the commanders to decide. But it is refreshing to hear you give the matter so much thought. I know Naomi is making a dig at Serena. I just can't figure out in which way. Like, I'm not sure if she's referring to the fact that Serena was essentially a handmaid at the Wheelers, or if it was her influence in the beginning of the Sons of Jacob and the whole fertility as a national resource agenda. It could be both. She's definitely taking a jab at Serena here because she can. But this is a bridal shower, and Serena's about to ingratiate herself with this group of women once again once she gets married. This would be the best opportunity for her to wear the dress and pull the strings, as June once told her, but it's going to be an uphill battle if she's aligning herself with these women who, they already have a high station in Gilead. She's trying to preach reform to a bunch of women who don't want reform. And she's going to have to find a different angle, but at least she's trying. This is what I mean by, like, Serena here is doing more to change the hearts and minds of these Gilead operatives, although obviously the wives don't have a whole lot of sway and power, but they do have some kind of influence, and they are people living in Gilead, and these are the women who are really getting behind and signing on to this ideology. But at least Serena is trying to affect some change within this group. We don't see Nick affecting any change other than to protect you, and that's very glaringly clear in this episode with all of these people, even the ones that were once behind Gilead's ideologies, trying to change it and seeing the issues. And Nick's the only one who's resigned himself to this is just the way it is. So we come off the bridal shower and we cut to Serena back at home, simmering in front of the window as she tries to remain on God's path. And Wharton comes in and he's talking about finding a place in Boston for them. And he says it's hard finding something in Boston that's tasteful and big enough. And the way he uses the word tasteful reminds me of the way the wife in the last scene had used the word modern when she described New Bethlehem, and then she got really disgusted. Tasteful just kind of sounds like code for traditional. It rubbed me wrong the way he said tasteful, and then he follows it up with big enough, which it's clear, Serena, that he wants a bunch more babies. Like, is that what you want? Like, a bunch more babies? I mean, I guess it doesn't need to be babies for him to need a big house as a commander. They say it in the Testaments. I don't think they mention it in the Handmaid's Tale, but in the Testaments they explain that the higher up you are as a commander, the more Marthas you're issued. So if he's going to have a bunch of Marthas running a household, therefore he's going to have a big household. But if he's going to have a big household, he's going to need a bunch of babies. So they're either going to come from Serena or they're going to come from a handmaid. I don't think there's a foster system. Not at this point, really. I doubt it. But either way, they're going to be acquiring children for this large household of this important commander, and important commanders need large households. So that's why he wants this big, tasteful house. And I just don't see it in Serena's agenda here. I mean, she's worried about reform in New Bethlehem. She's not worried about having more babies and where these babies are going to come from. She's more worried about where these handmaids are going to go after they give these babies up. So Serena tells him what is bothering her, and he tells her, "You're the future Mrs. Wharton. They will treat you with respect." And she responds with, "It seems like their husbands don't support our ideas of reform either." I think it's so funny that he's like, "My name implies respect," and she's like, "No, they don't respect your ideas either. Trust me, their husbands are unimpressed." And I do think that this is a smart way for Serena to jockey for position within the wives that she's about to join, right? But it's also her doubling down on this delusion/illusion of marriage in Gilead and what being a Gilead wife entails and what putting that blue dress on means. Like, and if she wants big change, she is going to need a big influence, and being at the top of the wives and their important husbands is definitely a place to start. But she's still going to have to do it as the property of Commander Wharton. At the end of the day, she is going to be his property once they get married. And he will have the final say. Like, we've seen Fred double down on, "I'm the man of this household and I make the rules." And she's like, "Don't you answer to God?" And he's like, "You answer to me." And as much as Wharton says he's not Fred, I'm not convinced that he's not going to lean into the traditional Gilead values of marriage. She's still going to be in a box. It's just going to be a tasteful and large one. So he starts talking about the wedding, and he's saying how they'll have all the members of the community there, and he says handmaids, and that's when Serena gives some pushback, and she doesn't want the handmaids there, which makes me laugh because she doesn't seem to have any issues or realize that the Marthas, although not being raped and having their children taken from them, have still lost their freedom. And that seems to be lost on Serena still. For some reason, the Marthas being at the wedding is A-okay with her, but the handmaids is going to be a step too far. Until Wharton reminds her that they need to have all the members of the Gilead community there. and it wouldn't be a traditional wedding without it. And again, the use of traditional alarms me. And he says it'll be a show of unity. And it's like, once again, Serena is being used as the face of unity to bolster Gilead, and she's relegating herself to the quiet half of the room as a quote-unquote traditional Gilead wife. And somehow this is going to be the face of reform. So Serena starts to go into like wedding planning mode, and she says, I hope that we can change the venue this late. And he says, if anyone can make it happen, it's you. And now he's got her planning this event that's going to be fit for his rank. And this is exactly where he wants her, this strong, independent woman planning a wedding. And the last image is really, really cool, but really ominous. She's looking out the window, and the reflection of the sunset is like this streak across the window. And the last shot, it just looks like the sunset is striking her right in the heart. And it really makes me wonder if the sun is setting on Serena as she doubles down on mistakes she's made in the past. Then we cut to Lydia, and she's coming back to the Red Center, and Aunt Phoebe comes in and says, "Blessed day, Aunt Lydia." And she responds with, "I cannot be bothered today." She's so funny. I'm really curious what Lydia was planning on doing in the wake of what she assumes is Janine's death. But we will never know, because Phoebe tells her that Janine is still alive. And Lydia is overjoyed. And Lydia just still doesn't get it, because she's seen Janine at Jezebels. She wanted to get Janine out of Jezebels. She didn't want her there. She didn't think that was a good environment. But now that she is with Belle as a handmaid, Lydia can't figure out that Belle saved Janine and is using her as a handmaid for anything other than his own pleasure and enjoyment and to get his own kicks, which Larry has already explained to Lydia last season. This is why the handmaids have to stay in the houses. It's for the commander's enjoyment. You can't take the commander's toys away. And she's horrified by this notion, but this has already been explained to her, and she should be able to connect these dots now. And this is why Belle has been giving Janine special attention. It's not because he wants to protect her. Lydia just thinks that Belle looks at Janine like she's his special girl, the same way Lydia does. And Lydia can't see that the connotation there is incredibly different. Lydia just still doesn't get what men in Gilead will do given the powers that they have. Then we cut to the next scene where June is at May Day, and she's doing her own window simmering. And Moira comes up, and she stands right beside her, and she doesn't say anything. She just gives June the space to start speaking when she's ready. And so June starts by saying, "I forgot who he was." And Moira really tries to give her some reassurance, and she tells her, "He never gave you any reason not to trust him." And he didn't. That's fair, aside from the fact that he's wearing a commander's uniform. And Moira continues, she said, "You'd be dead if it weren't for him. We'd all be dead if it weren't for him." And June says that that doesn't justify anything. I think meaning all these women are dead now too, but these women are dead because this plan was attempted. And June knows that when you attempt these plans, things can go wrong and people can get killed unintentionally. So I don't think the deaths of those women are on Nick's hands any more than they're on June's hands. It's Gilead that went in and decided to slaughter all these women in order for these commanders to save face. And Moira says that if she had a commander at Jezebels trying to protect her, she would have fallen in love with him too. And I love what Moira is trying to do here. I do think it's a little bit deeper than what she's boiling it down to, which is fair. She wouldn't know the whole scope of their relationship. So I think June has long since reconciled being in love with Nick, despite his ranking within Gilead. Now she has to face the fact that Nick has only ever wanted to save her. He never wanted to take down Gilead or to save anyone else. And I think it's that realization that is really needling her while she questions the trust that she put in him. Because Moira's right that he had never given her any reason not to trust him, but at the same time, June should have been able to figure out that she can't trust him fully, especially with information like this. And I think that's what she means when she says, "I forgot who he was." And I just really love how Moira stands by her side, tells her that she understands, and then tries to make her laugh. And she starts listing off all of these famous women. And June keeps saying, he is not Angelina Jolie hot, he is not Sigourney Weaver hot, and he is definitely not Rihanna hot. And I just really love the scene between them. This really highlights everything in their friendship and what it does for them in their lives. Nick is really the embodiment of what Gilead will do to its truest soldiers, so to speak. It's really reiterated to them over and over again. Trust no one and follow orders in order to survive. Whereas June and Moira are the representation of everything that Gilead is trying to snuff out. There's that friendship and that connection and that love. And as soon as Nick found love, it started to destroy him and his loyalties to Gilead. And hopefully it will continue to. So June comes off of that conversation with Moira and she goes out to find Luke. And as she's approaching him, he can see her coming and he goes to have the conversation that they have been needing to have for so long. It's really been brewing under the surface of their relationship since she sent Holly Nicole to Canada, and then she told him that she was born out of love and that Nick helped her to survive. And that's why Luke threw that word savior in her face earlier, because I think that's been needling him since he received those tapes. And then she gets back to Canada and he can see that she still has feelings for Nick. And removing herself from Gilead didn't remove those feelings. So June goes to apologize and she tells him that she never realized what she was doing to him since she's gotten back to Canada. And he tries to brush it aside and kind of like give an excuse for her. And he says, you've been through a lot. And she says, no, don't do that. I don't want you to pity me. And I don't want you to feel sorry for me. And he asks her, what do you want? And she tells him that she wants him to be happy and that she wants him to be with someone that deserves him. And then she asks him what he wants. And he says, I should want to leave you, but I can't. And she says, I can't either. There you have it. They're willing to love the people that they've become. And June had tried to give Luke that out when she found Nick and when she sent him those tapes and explained who Nick was and their relationship. And she told Luke then that she wanted him to find a way to move on, that it was okay to find happiness and have a life instead of just waiting for her. And he didn't. He waited for her. And that's why I think she was saying to Nick, like, Luke waited for me. And Luke talks about how much he misses Hannah. And June asks him if that's the only reason that they're still together. And he says that it's not the only reason. This makes me so happy to be able to see them finally at least just acknowledge that there is another relationship here, to acknowledge that June does have feelings for somebody else, that she has had feelings for somebody else, that she told Luke to move on and find feelings for somebody else also. He doesn't have to stick around while she dates Nick and Gilead. And he did. He stuck around. And then she got back and he continued to stick around and to stand up for her and to show up for her. And at the very least, I feel like she owed him this conversation of what do you want? And acknowledging that this is difficult for him, to watch her go back to Gilead and to put herself at risk and to go for someone that she's in love with and that she has a child with, that Luke is raising as his child. Like, this is all just very, very complicated, and this conversation makes it feel a lot less complicated because at the core, it's just two people that love and care about each other and are willing to still show up for each other and love and care about each other. And the difference here between June and Luke versus June and Nick is that June and Luke are fighting for the same thing. It makes it so much easier for them to show up for each other when they're fighting from the same side. Both literally on a border on the same side, and also ideologically, they're fighting for the same side. They're never going to have their plans butt up against each other. This is the easier relationship for June in the sense of circumstances of their lives right now. And so if she has to choose, and I'm really team she doesn't have to choose, but if we're going to say she has to choose, this is the more logical choice if she has feelings for both of these men. Her future with Nick is always going to be raw and precarious at best, as long as Gilead is still operating. And there's nothing that Nick's doing to make it stop operating. So why would she want to put all of her eggs in that basket? I feel like there's still a lot of questions about what Nick's going to do in the next 3 episodes. But regardless of what happens with Nick and June, I absolutely love that Luke and June could have this conversation finally. Then we've got Lydia strolling up the Bell's driveway and she's got Janine's little Handmaid suitcase in hand. And she's still overjoyed when she is greeted by Wharton at the door. And he puts on a good enough face at first when he greets her, but you can tell pretty instantly that he just wants that handmaid outfit and he wants her gone. She says, I prayed to God for her rescue and he delivered you. And I'm like, my God, she really doesn't get it. Not even here. And Lydia asks if she's been adjusting and he says, oh, we've been working on her adjustment all morning. You can see her face is a little taken aback by his choice of words. And he says, she's quite the firecracker. And then Lydia starts to put the pieces together. So Lydia asks if she can see her and he's like, nope, not now, we're busy. And she goes, well, tell her I look forward to seeing her at the wedding. And he goes, oh, she won't be fit for viewing, which is really fucking ominous. And Lydia finally gets it at that point that there's something wrong here. So he sends her on her way and shuts the door. And as Lydia is walking back, she sees Janine up in the window. And Janine is battered. Quite literally shattered. She only gets a glimpse of Janine before it looks like a Martha yanks her back from the window, and she's gone. Then we cut back to Mayday, where June is quite literally packing it in, and it seems like it's the first time that she's had a moment to herself since finding out about Nick and Wharton in the Mayday Jezebel plan. And through all of that, in the closet, the drive back, and then having to confront Mayday, Luke, and Moira, she really put on a brave face and kind of just tried to own up to her actions and the consequences of them. And this is the first time she's really allowing herself a bit of an emotional break to grieve everything that she's lost in the last couple hours. She had hope that she was going to get to Janine and hope that she was going to kill all of these commanders. She had Nick on the inside as somebody 100% trustworthy that she could count on all the time, and now she's realizing he has allegiances elsewhere. And she's grieving the loss of this relationship that has meant so much to her. Like, we know June cares about Nick. We know she loves him. And that relationship just kind of ended in a thud or a shattering. And now where does she turn with her resistance fight? Without Nick and without the trust of these Mayday operatives, she doesn't have anywhere to go but Alaska. So now she has to give up her fight with Mayday as well. And as much as she was resisting it earlier in the season, this is where she wants to be. This is where her heart wants to be. She isn't going to be able to rest and relax and find peace unless she's fighting. And her and Luke have just joined this fight, and now they're packing up and going home. And now it kind of feels like her and Luke are back to square one of trying to get to Hannah. And they have to once again resign themselves to the fact that they're never going to be able to get to her. Then a car rolls in, and it's Larry. And as demoralized as June is right now, Tuello and Larry are not ready to give up the fight. They have warhawks to kill. So Larry finds her packing up a suitcase. He gets right to the heart of the matter by starting with, "I always thought you were an idiot for trusting him." And she says, "You trusted him." And he says, "But I was always selective about what I told him." And I think, like, in hindsight, looking back at that, that was absolutely June's misstep. She was very hesitant to trust Larry. She didn't want to give him all the information all the time because she knew that anything she told him he could use to improve his station amongst the commanders. And it just never occurred to her that Nick would have to do the same thing. It's not even like he was doing it in some kind of opportunistic way. He had his back against the wall and he didn't have another choice. And it just never occurred to her that that would ever be an option for him to divulge information that she wouldn't want him to. And now she's hearing it from Larry that she really should have been more selective. Because this is Gilead and it can always come to a point of life or death. If Nick didn't have that information, he wouldn't have been able to give it away. But because his back was against the wall, he had to make the move he had to make, and it was under duress. And Larry was smart enough to never trust Nick with that kind of information, given the fact that it would be so easy for him to find himself in a situation of high stress where he might have no choice but to divulge information he didn't otherwise want to. So she asks him why he's there, and he says he wants her to find another way to kill those commanders like she promised. And she says that they won't listen to her, and he says, "When has that ever stopped you?" And I love through this entire conversation, Larry just knows how to appeal to June, and watching the two of them interact brings me such joy. It's because Larry has that manipulator mastermind abilities. He really knows how to play into every single one of the tactics that would appeal to June. And he just goes through the list one by one until he finally gets her to stop and come up with a plan. She continues packing and she's ready to walk out with her packed bag. And she's like, "Look, I'm sorry for your situation, but I can't help you." He goes, "Serena never quit. She's about to be Mrs. Wharton, Queen of Gilead. And where are you going to be, June? Watching the pageantry in Boston from a trailer park in Alaska?" When he puts it like that, it just sounds so far removed from anything that June has been working towards. And June tries to brush him off, and she's like, "What makes you think I care what Serena does?" And he's like, "So when her wedding is broadcast live, and she's flanked with these handmaids who have to look at the ground because they can't meet her in the eye, that's okay with you?" And you can see June start to twitch. He's slowly chipping away at her armor. He stopped her from walking with Serena. He's starting to get her to reconsider with the handmaids. And then he hits her with, "That's your legacy? That's the way June Osborne's last chapter in Gilead ends?" And that's all he's ever seen from June, is this fight to take down Gilead. So to watch her flame go out in such a fizzle, he knows that that can't be the way she wants her legacy to end. She's talked about her legacy before. She's talked about being remembered and continuing to fight for all those who she's already lost and those that are still stuck in Gilead. So for her to give up this fight while she's still alive to go sit and watch it all unfold in Alaska. She can't do that. We know she can't. And Larry knows she can't either. But June is nothing if she's not persistent, and she still resists this appeal by him. And she says, my last chapter ended with all those women dead. And he says, Janine's not dead. It does stop her in her tracks. And he tells her, but I bet she wishes she were dead because that pervert Bell has her as his handmaid. And June still doubles down and says, I hope she kills him in her sleep. And she's about to keep walking when it dawns on her that the wedding is the perfect opportunity. I feel like she was able to resist getting pulled back into this fight through this conversation with Larry because she didn't have another move. Without Nick in play and with Larry looking to her like, what's the next move? She just didn't have an idea and therefore didn't have the ability to persist and continue on with this resistance and this plan and Mayday. Like, she's going to continue to fight, to pack up her bag and walk out the door until this idea hits. And once she has an idea, bags down, meeting in the lobby because we've got another plan. That's really all June needed, was not this motivation. It wasn't all of these appeals that Larry was giving her. It was the information that she needed to employ another plan. And as soon as she heard handmaids at the wedding, she figured out that there was a way in. And that's what I just am so excited to see, is we know exactly how all of these handmaids have been trained to work discreetly and to operate within the back of these rooms and not be seen and not be noticed. And that is going to be the best thing they have moving forward with this plan. And it was so fun to watch June just start to list out all of the things Serena's going to do and how well she knows her, because she's had to live so closely with her and watch the ways in which she operates. And she knows exactly where every chink in the armor is going to be and every way in which they can infiltrate this wedding. And everyone has a different pushback to her plan, and she's just got an answer for everything. Gilead just had a big win, so they're going to let their guard down. And June says how the handmaids had nothing to do with it, so they aren't going to be suspected. And then Tuello is worried that there's too many people involved in this plan and the chances of it being compromised are too high. And that's when June points out that handmaids are trained not to talk. All those people at that wedding, one giant group, veiled and anonymous. And then Moira jumps in there and she goes, that's how we'll hide. And June asks Moira if she's sure she's ready to go back in. And Moira says, hell yeah, I'm going with you. And I think you can see the relief in June's face, knowing that she's going to have Moira by her side again. And June says that she's going to smuggle the weapons in. And they cut to all of these knives or box cutters being slid into this garment so she can carry all of them in. And that's why I just love that shattered quote through this whole episode, because you watch every single person get shattered and the plan get shattered. And by the end of it, they put all these broken pieces back into place and they found a cutting edge to attempt to escape the torment that they're still under, even though they're not living within the confines of Gilead. Those scars are still there. There's peoples that are still there, and the fight has to continue. And then Luke points out that they still have bombs. And I was laughing at first because last week in the comments, there were people saying that the bombs were a stupid plan to begin with and it's better off that that plan got scrapped. And I was kind of laughing and agreeing with it. Like, yeah, the bombs did kind of sound crazy. But there's actually been a lot of bomb usage through this series with Mayday. So I actually like that they're going to use these bombs to create this chaos and this big diversion and this big scene that we've seen glimpses of in the trailer. Like, we see Luke throw the grenade, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of this come together, and I'm actually kind of excited for these bombs. We saw the bomb being used to blow up the new Red Center in First Blood. And in season 3, when June was working with the Martha Network, they were smuggling a chemist out because she could make bombs, and they made some kind of joke about Breaking Bad. But that's the reality of the situation, is they're going to fight back with any capable means that they have, and apparently they do have these bombs, and we've seen Mayday be able to acquire and build these bombs through the series. And then with all the confusion and the chaos, that's the perfect time to bring in the military. And then June starts talking about gathering up anyone and everyone who's been fucked over by Gilead, anyone that wants revenge on them. We're going to put them all in place. And as she's saying this, Rita shows up, and it looks like she's in that like Mayday drop-off meeting place near the border where June and Nick keep meeting. And she's showing up to retrieve some poison, it looks like. It must be poison, because then the next scene, you see her doing the cake tasting. And someone had mentioned in the comments that Rita will be able to poison the cake that she makes for Serena's wedding. And so that looks like exactly what they're going to do. It must be poison, right? It couldn't be a bomb. Yeah, it's got to be poison because we see her making the cake. So what else would it be? So they're going to put some kind of poison in... Wait, so are they killing the commanders with knives or are they poisoning them? They're clearly employing every tactic they can into this one plan, and they're going to knock it all down like dominoes and hope that they can take out all these commanders. And we finally get to see Rita joining the resistance, and that's what happens when you have hope dangled in front of you in this reunion with her sister that she got, and this hope that she would be able to get her and her family out. And Nick shot down that hope and said the only person you can count on is yourself. And so now we see Rita going into the fight because she can only count on herself. Thanks, Nick. I just really love this montage and this scene of the voiceover of all the planning and then the questioning of the plan and June explaining it, with Serena doing exactly what June was saying in the background. And then you get Rita showing up and picking something up, and then it's the cake tasting. And I just love the way it was all cut together. And then it ends with June saying, they're never going to see us coming. And you see Larry's car rolling into Gilead. And there's a guardian that greets him and he says, "Blessed evening, Commander." And Larry responds, "No doubt," and rolls on in. And his first order of business is to send Lydia away. And he tells her that he's arranged for her to go meet with the Department of Human Reallocation to pitch her plan about the Handmaid retirement system. And she's like, "Wow, I didn't really think you'd care about this." And he's like, "No, a fertility center in New Bethlehem? That's a perfect tourist trap." Then you get a quick shot of Aunt Phoebe standing outside the car, and she's kind of looking around. But then you go back into Lydia and Larry. She's like, "Well, what about the wedding?" He's like, "Small sacrifice. I can't think of anyone that can make the case to DC better than you." And she's so charmed by the flattery, but she really does not want to miss this wedding. And the only reason I think that Lydia really wants to go to this wedding is so that she can politic, but specifically with Belle. I think she needs to find out what's going on with Belle, get some dirt on Belle, persuade Belle. I mean, she's definitely still fixated on Janine here, so she's got to have some kind of ulterior motive for working this wedding so that she can get Janine out of his clutches. Yeah, that's got to be what she's doing. So she doesn't want to be off in DC abandoning Janine while she's battered at the Belle's house, shattered at the Belle's house. But Larry tells her, "Nope, it's you and you got to go. Flight's now. Get in the car. Pack your bag." Then we cut outside to Aunt Phoebe, and she's going up to a guardian and she's telling him that she thinks there's a hole in the fence and we just can't be too safe. Maybe it's a weasel. And I really, really like that little line. And she convinces the guardian to go check out this break in the fence. And then he cut back to Larry and Lydia, and he's like, "Lydia, your girls, they need you. You gotta go." And she's run out of ways to get out of this, and she says, "By God's grace." And she goes in to pack her bag. Then we cut back to Phoebe, and she pops the trunk, and there's June. She says, "Blessed day. Let the revolution begin." Then you get one more shot of June smiling away in that cozy little trunk of hers. Then we see Aunt Phoebe smuggling June and Moira in through the Red Center. And I really love these shots because we've seen June arriving at the Red Center in a couple different iterations. We see her when she arrives in the classroom when Moira's first there, and then we see her on the stairs when she's first being brought in and she's still in regular clothes. So we've seen this Red Center so many times, and it's such a symbolic thing for June. So to see her and Moira infiltrating this Red Center to go undercover and kill all these commanders in this final plan is really, really fun to see. I enjoyed them running around the halls of this school turned Red Center. And I really, really love Aunt Phoebe's disposition and the way she talks to Lydia and the way she's this like undercover aunt. I just enjoy this actress's portrayal of this person because her demeanor is so soothing all the time. She's just so lovely. And she's an aunt, so you know she's got to be horrible somewhere, and you know she's done horrible things to be where she is as this aunt. Again, the Testaments has ruined me because we know exactly what these aunt initiations look like. So she just seems so lovely, and she's got to have this brutal side to her. But to see that she's working with Mayday is great because I really like her. And Phoebe updates them on the plan. They're really excited to see them. They're not going to believe that they're there. But she tells them that Janine is not in on the plan because Belle isn't going to let her come to the wedding. And June brushes it off. I'll take care of it. We can't leave her behind and we can't let him off the hook. So then Phoebe leaves them and she's kind of in a rush and she runs into Lydia. And she comes up with a story about spilling tea and needing a mop and a bucket and it's all cleaned up now, no worries. So Lydia tells her that she's got to leave. And Phoebe tells her, don't you worry, the girls are going to be on their best behavior. And Lydia tells her, I will see you to it. And she's very, very pointed when she says that. And I believe that she means it. And it just really is another highlight of all of these people that are putting their necks on the line and their survival on the line in order to end this regime. And I'm just waiting for Nick to show up and do the same thing because we haven't seen him do that yet. I don't think June's ever going to be able to see past what he's done with this Mayday plan and what's happened to these Jezebels if he can't get fully on board with a Mayday plan and help it in some way. And he has the most power, or at least equal amount of power to Larry. I guess he's not a high commander, but at some point in these next 3 episodes, I think we really need to see Nick choose resistance and choose rebellion. And if he does not choose that, if he just chooses survival and Gilead, I don't know if there's ever going to be a future for him and June. So Aunt Phoebe tells her, the Lord's going to watch over us and he's going to watch over you on your travels. And she takes off. And Lydia's skeptical. She can sense that there's something off. I don't know if she can just sense that June is in the building. But for as dense as Lydia's been through this season, she's very perceptive here that something's wrong. She knows her aunts and the Red Center and the women's business that she's been put in charge of. And she can tell that something is not right here. Then we cut to the final scene. And it's June and Moira sitting somewhere? The Red Center? Like the kitchen of a Red Center. They're waiting it out. They have to wait. And June says, and Moira says to her, okay, what are we doing here? And I think she means here, like Gilead, and not here in the room that I'm not sure where they're at. Or what they're doing. I don't know I think they're just hiding from Lydia. They gotta wait for Lydia to get in her car and get on her flight. We haven't seen her do that yet, so they're just waiting, hiding. So as they wait and hide, this is the conversation that they're having. And Moira says, what are we doing here? And June says, well, we're here to get Janine and we're here for all the other women. And Moira tells her to say something leadery. I really, really, really appreciated that because we've seen June do that so much. And I appreciated that in this moment, Moira at least could turn to her and be like, hey, you that says you've been in this position all the time and you know what you're doing, give me some words of inspiration. So June starts with a Bible verse, the Gangster Paradise Bible verse, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that one. It's a very leadery quote to give and a very biblical quote to give. I mean, it's basically about not being afraid, God's watching over you. But she ends it with, please, dear God, give us the strength to murder those goddamn motherfuckers. And that is when I realized how much I didn't realize I missed the monologues, or how much I didn't realize the monologues were missing. I miss the monologues. I miss the monologues because if nothing else, it has always given me a way to focus on what I'm talking about in this episode and a way to kind of extract what I need to extract from these episodes. And when I don't have the monologues, I have to pluck quotes out of The Handmaid's Tale that have the word shattered in them and hope that it kind of makes some sense. So I did really like this ending, and I like that she's not actually saying it as a monologue in her head because we're in such a different place. She's infiltrating Gilead. She's infiltrating the Red Center and I think hiding in the Red Center, giving the speech. In the beginning of the series, we see her trying to escape and they're bringing her in. And now she's going to take everything that she's learned and hopefully kill these goddamn motherfuckers. So that's an episode. All right. That's it. They're all shattered, and now they're all into places, except for Nick. Nick really is the biggest question mark. And Wharton. I suppose that Wharton could still turn good. I just don't think so. And I really don't think that imagery of that sunset piercing Serena's chest is a good sign. Or a coincidence. Like, that just felt like there is a sun setting on Serena and she's making too many of the same mistakes that she made before. And they're reminding us that these are the mistakes that she's made before. That flashback of her talking about the first time she met Fred, before she was radicalized into Sons of Jacob and Gilead and everything that she's making amends for now. is because of that relationship and that marriage. And she's going to put on the blue dress again. And it just, Wharton's just too much of a wild card. I mean, if throughout the series, Nick has been shrouded in ambiguity, throughout this season, Wharton has, because he comes off as progressive and like a great match for Serena, and all things considered, not so bad. But there's these like weird coded words, and we've seen the temper that he had with Nick and the fact that he just had all those Jezebels slaughtered. Like, we know the real Wharton, or we've at least seen glimpses of the real Wharton, and I don't think Serena's seen any of those yet. And it seems like we are going to be seeing a wedding next episode. And if we do, there's going to be no going back for Serena after that. So we'll see. Also, Lydia, we haven't seen her leave, and this June and Lydia reunion is just too tantalizing for me that I really hope she's not on a plane. I don't think she's going to be either. Like, that would be kind of crazy if they just sent Lydia to DC and we don't see her for the rest of the season. Like, see you in the Testaments, Lydia. Stay tuned. I don't think that they're actually going to do that, but that would be really funny. I think Lydia is going to stick around. If I had to put money on it, I would say that since we haven't seen Lydia get in a car and leave yet, and the last thing we saw is a highly skeptical look on her face as Phoebe like shuffled down the hallway, I'm thinking Lydia's not going anywhere. And ooh, is this where we get the where is Jude Osborne? I want to see this so bad. That's it. We are down to 3 more episodes. I only have 1 more episode in my screeners, so I'm going to edit this, get this out to you, and then get right into that episode and get that analysis done. And then I should have some time for predictions after that because I don't have any more episodes to watch. So that'll be the perfect time for us to just see exactly where we're at with these last 2 episodes of the series and guess what we're going to see from there, because I'm thinking a lot of the trailer stuff we'll see in the next episode, and I'm guessing that a lot of 9 and 10 is not at all in the trailer, so hopefully it's pretty blind. I don't know. We'll see. 3 more episodes. I'm going to leave it here, and we'll see you back here shortly for the next episode, Exodus. Oh man, that's a Bible thing. That's going to be a double word on Bibles. I'm going to have to call Roxy and Scarlett up and ask them about the book of Exodus. Stay tuned. Until then, thanks for listening.